Are we rolling?
Yes, we're
I'm like, come on.
No, go for it.
Okay. So my name is Nwabisa. I'm the Strategic Partnerships Director at the Branson Centre. I so happen to be based in Cape Town in South Africa, and that's who I am today.
Yeah. What is the Branson Centre of Entrepreneurship?
That is a very good question, because I think it goes back to the idea of does it mean to be an entrepreneur. And so I'm a podcaster as well, so you'll find that sometimes I try to deflect the questions. But I'm going back to the idea of, before I even define what the Branson Centre is, it's this ethos of this idea of, we believe that entrepreneurs are these entities that can go on to change business for good. And so the Branson Centre is probably the opposite of what you think it is when you hear the name. And so we are a venture studio that enables purpose-led, entrepreneur-led innovation to change business for good in a way that solves for global challenges.
Yeah.
And so effectively, whilst the obvious understanding is that we service entrepreneurs, but we actually service business, meaning that if you can enable big business to understand its purpose and to understand how it plays a role in changing business for good, the decisions that are made at big business level are the very decisions that will then enable entrepreneurs. And if entrepreneurs are then enabled to be able to bring innovation into big business, it means together we're all changing business for good. So effectively, the Branson Centre exists to join the suits to the sneakers.
That's such a great way of putting it. Do you think the suits and corporates really understand their responsibility in being able to change business for good and start to drive meaningful impact in society? From, just being capitalistic endeavors to going, hey, you know what, actually, how do we then, plow back in some way?
Some suits, and so for us, suits encompasses both big business and also the investors. And so some suits will have a notional understanding of their responsibility, but also the opportunity they can find in changing business for good. But there's something that disconnects the moment then they start thinking about the bottom line. And what we're here to say is that there doesn't need to be a disconnect between building and growing an inclusive economy that enables healthy people and sustains a planet that is thriving. And so people are starting to understand that, because some of these things are starting to become urgent and actually a crisis. So on one hand, you can talk about the climate crisis, but actually you can also talk about the crisis around the fight for relevance. And so if your business, big business, or even you as an investment house, if you're no longer relevant, you can't continue doing what you do, which is to try and make money, to try and optimize shareholder value, et cetera, et cetera. And so we are here to talk about, when we're talking about changing business for good, it's not a feel good. It's not something that has to then sit on the shoulders of impact-driven, purpose-led entrepreneurs. It is absolutely critical to your survival. It is absolutely critical to you possibly remaining relevant, even just for the next 3 years, because we're seeing what the rate of change is like. In fact, I would implore anyone listening to almost do a quick comparative of what were the companies that were sitting on the Fortune 500 list 50 years ago, and look at what's sitting on the Fortune 500 list today, and then also see how quickly companies are slipping off the Fortune 500 list. Before, a company could sit on the Fortune 500 list maybe for up to 75 years. These days, it's about 15 years and declining. So nobody gets to be top dog for a very long time. And so if you want to at least be relevant, you need to start thinking about these issues around changing business for good, which means you're having a positive impact on definitely the economy, definitely on people, definitely on the planet.
Yeah. When you look at the entrepreneurs that are accessing the programs that you have and, are a part of the ecosystem that you guys are building, what are you guys looking for typically?
So interestingly enough, going back to even how we were founded and what we stand for. So of course, founded on the back of the name of our namesake, Sir Richard Branson, who really understands in terms of how he's built businesses. It's all about, screw it, let's do it. And so, when I'm proud to be part of the Virgin family, where we can look back and say, being part of the Branson Centre, being part of the Virgin family means you're part of an organization, a family that's got 53 years of experience of smart disruption in over 50 industries. Some spectacular wins, some formidable challenger brands that have come through, and then some interesting maybe failures or losses or oopsies. That's okay, that's all part of the thing. So it means that when we're coming into the ecosystem, we're not here to train any entrepreneurs. We're not here to teach any entrepreneurs. We're here to enable entrepreneurs. And so we're always asking ourselves the question is, which is the best way in which we can enable a founder to go on to change business for good themselves? So one of the things that we always talk about is how can we unlock purpose in an entrepreneur? They already have it, but perhaps how can they articulate it? How can they embed it in their businesses, and how can they measure the success of their business against their purpose? That's one thing. In terms of practically, what can we do that really is enabling as opposed to training or teaching? It is how can we enable an entrepreneur to access network? How can we enable an entrepreneur to access finance? And how can we enable an entrepreneur to access customers? And so what are we looking for in terms of, wow, that's a good bet? We're looking for a business that already has impact by design embedded in what's going on. And so for us, we like to focus on things like what we call the earth shots. So businesses that have a very clear positive impact on things that have got to do with climate, with waste, with the ocean, with air quality, that sort of thing, because there are massive opportunities, some of them right now, but also on the horizon in terms of entrepreneur-led innovation and how that can solve for some of the biggest problems in terms of the planetary health. There is massive amounts of money to be made in the spec sector. There is also incredible reform happening from a policy perspective, locally, internationally. And so competitive advantage for founders will actually be embedded in this idea of, can you show that your business is already talking about impact on planet and ready to make money in this space? So we're looking for that. We're looking for founders who have businesses that can scale both in South Africa, but actually be fit to scale globally, because we're talking about solving global challenges. And we're looking for businesses that also have the ability to work with other businesses. So effectively, we're not looking for unicorns, because are they even real? But what we are, what we are looking for are these zebras. So businesses that have the ability to work in a herd and then leave the environment a little bit better off than before.
Yeah. And, you didn't use the term, which is often sort of associated with entrepreneurs that are, focused on people, planet, and impact specifically, which is social entrepreneur. Why is that?
This is a personal philosophy, which is every time you add an adjective in front of the word entrepreneur, you immediately take that entrepreneur out of the room and you other them and you put them in another box. And so whether we're talking about social entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, black entrepreneurs, township entrepreneurs, creative entrepreneurs, etc., and then you've already boxed them out of the room. For me, it's about an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur. And then it's on us as the enablers of the entrepreneurs to understand sector, what success looks like for that entrepreneur, and then get them wrapped up with the right resources that they need to then achieve what success looks like. But I'm not going to define you as you walk into the room, which means I take you out the room immediately.
Yeah. I had a question. Ready?
It's okay. We can make up more questions.
Give me a minute. This is where the editing comes in.
I know. Also, I know that I have a rather long-winded way of answering questions, which might throw an interviewer off.
It's okay. It's a very neat trick, though. So, I don't want to call them social entrepreneurs then, right? So these entrepreneurs who have this focus on impact, on people, on planet, it's a very different frame of thinking or approach to try and build a business around this, right? And the way you build this business, the intention that you do it, needs to be very different. Have you seen, characteristics or formulas for how they're building that is so different from what was traditionally seen as the right way to build things?
I think it takes us back to that word formula. There is no formula. And so the way to enable an entrepreneur to really get to where they need to be is to first understand them, understand why they do what they do, which is purpose, understand what keeps them up at night, what gets them out of bed, and then sit with the entrepreneur and understand what does success look like for them. Because it's very easy for us to come in and say, for us, we think this business will then be seen as successful when it has X in terms of revenue, when it's got Y in terms of jobs created, and is perhaps operating in these territories. That's my dream for that business, which means that that's my version of success. Is that entrepreneur really going to then be attached to the plans that you put in place together to get them to success when you've articulated success for them? And so once you've got to a place where you're okay with an entrepreneur articulating what success looks like for them, you then start putting into place the things that will enable them. And so perhaps the characteristic there is rather, is this an individual who is open to sharing? Is it an individual who is open to articulating even the things that frighten them? Is this an individual who's also able to communicate when things aren't fitting? You know, they're not looking at this as a top-down relationship, and so it's a partnership. And so perhaps maybe this is part of also how we do our work as the Branson Centre. We don't have a big call for applications and run cohorts. We rather create conversations and create communities around specific themes. And then based on what we understand is happening in that specific sector, we invite certain entrepreneurs to work with us. And we then need to demonstrate value to them as opposed to them demonstrating value to us. Because they've got in place everything they need to run that business. They just need to be enabled, and they need a partner for 1,000 days, maybe even longer. And so I don't know what the characteristics are, and I don't want to know what the characteristics are because there is no formula. But it rather depends on what is the need. Can we truly say we can work together, and are you willing to work with us? And let's then define success based on what you want.
Yeah, when you look at entrepreneur enablement in South Africa and like what is, definitely might be missing or a gap that you guys are trying to fill, what would that be?
It is the gap between a very strong programmatic focus, lots of programs out there, and there's a gap between what happens when those programs end and then what we want to see. And so people are coming into a lot of programs, they're receiving a lot of training, a lot of mentorship, and then at the end of a time period, we graduate them, we wish them well, and then we wonder why we're not seeing success. So I think the idea and the gap that we're specifically trying to fill is this idea of what does it look like when entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs are in the game, as opposed to program managers, people who are coaches working with entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Your answers are so tricky. I'm going to edit this so bad.
Politician.
No, I mean by the way, this has not happened so far. I've already recorded 6 episodes.
I mean, if you're saying I'm a tricky guest, that's fine.
Okay.
But also, it's the trick is to need to ask me the thing you really want to ask me. Do you know what I mean?
I am so immersed in what you're saying that I'm like, no, hold on. What is good?
She is spinning something around me here.
Please give me a moment. I'm just fixing myself here. No, this is insane. I've had so many interviews. This has not happened yet.
Have I confused you or have I upset you?
No, it's okay. So, I'm excited to edit this though because this is really good. You described, the Branson Centre as a venture studio. What does that mean?
So, now I'm very good at remembering book titles, but then never remember the author, so forgive me. But there is a book that we all ended up reading and circulating amongst ourselves called The Unicorn Within. And it talks about how there is a place for ventures and venture building that will actually drive innovation within large businesses and corporations. And so what it says, or what it informs us at the Branson Centre, is that if you sit and every day you are banging on just training, teaching, enabling entrepreneurs, but you're not looking at the greater ecosystem, which is then big market opportunities. So big business needs to be in this game as well. Big business is not set up to be entrepreneurial either. So actually what you're trying to do is enable entrepreneurship in both parts of this equation, which is the entrepreneur who's growing a business and big business that's probably hungry and desperate for entrepreneurialism, but also perhaps entrepreneur-led innovation. So that's kind of context. But for us, a venture studio then is about building ventures and investing in ventures within the same sort of house, as opposed to we train, and then we hope you'll get investment. And the other bit that we don't say out loud is also making sure that these ventures have access then to market opportunities, and it's all happening within the same shop. And that's why we look at ourselves as a venture studio. The second bit around venture studio for me, as a word nerd, is the idea of studio already tells you that we're doing. We're creating, we're building, we're breaking, we're trying, might even be burning our fingers a little bit. We're playing. And so that is also important even for ourselves as a team to understand that we're here to be in a studio and to just try things out and be quite messy as well. So that's also just the ethos around it.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally there's a lot of, in the ecosystem, and whether that's the past or, where we are now, a very traditional sort of incubator, accelerator. How do you think of those models and how they've sort of been able to drive impact in the ecosystem versus, this new thinking of a venture studio?
So I think the place for incubators and accelerators, of course, is about incubation. So it really is, how do we take an idea and try and grow it and nurture it? I think in certain respects that is incredibly necessary because the reality is, for example, as a black woman, I don't come from a family that's made up of entrepreneurs. I don't come from a family that's got money or even sort of those social safety nets. And so perhaps when I'm at the early stages of my business, I do need to be in an environment that's highly structured, really that gives me a roadmap in terms of where I'm going. And maybe I need to see many other people who look like me in the room at the same time. So I think that's been the really, really incredible role of incubators and accelerators in sort of the traditional form because of that community aspect, the sense of safety and security that comes through. Where the venture studio then breaks away a little bit from that is that you're then bringing in effectively the virgin way, which is you've got to every now and again be able to just reach a little bit further out onto the edge of the cliff and be okay to jump off the cliff. The venture studio will be there to catch you and hopefully let you fly. And so we talk about flight plans and flight paths. We so happen to have also a space company. So I think venture studio just brings in a little bit more of a robustness to it. It's not for everyone, and I'm not here to evangelize for everyone to be a part of this, and you shouldn't be. That's okay, in the same way that not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur, by the way. But I think venture studio just brings in the next step that is even riskier, even scarier, but my goodness, I think the rewards are really, they're there.
Yeah, and when you sort of speak to entrepreneurs and you showing them this new way of building things, and when they've sort of built something that can sort of work in the structures that you guys have built, what are you saying to them will happen with that journey? What is the impact that you hope to have on them? And also, have you seen that impact in entrepreneurs that came into that ecosystem and came out the other side? You could see that, okay, wait, this is what really happened to them, and this is how their businesses have been, changed by it as well.
Let's talk about COVID. So pandemic starts 2020, everybody's lives change. And the big panic at that point was every venture that's within the Branson Centre's sort of ecosystem, how do we make sure that we can save jobs? Or in fact, our biggest fear is that everybody's going to close and possibly lose jobs. And so the real focus and the arrowhead for our focus was how do we just maintain and save jobs. Up until now, one of our key performance indicators has been around the job creation aspect of the businesses that we work with. So our indicator of success with any venture that works with the Branson Centre is this idea of, does it have the ability to scale and create 100 full-time equivalent jobs in South Africa over 1,000 days? So there was always this idea of job creation through the businesses. Suddenly, the pandemic hits and it's about just save jobs. I'm happy to report that through the hardest parts of lockdowns, the pandemic, not one of the businesses that was within our ecosystem and still is lost a job. That's insane when you think about how shut down the economy was. And so how did these businesses get to save their jobs? Well, it goes back to this idea of our impact on a business is to enable purpose. When a founder understands their purpose, suddenly you'll find that they're not that attached to the how. They know what they need to do to keep on impacting and enabling their purpose and seeing it being enacted. And so you find a business that perhaps was selling product, suddenly going into a business that goes, well, when we were selling product, we were a B2C business. During this moment, we can still pivot our model and become a B2B business and still have our purpose being enabled, for example. So our impact in any business that we work with is, can you articulate your purpose? Can you embed it? And when the times are tricky, can you go back to your purpose to help you make the next decision that is right for your business? I think what has been very exciting is watching one of the founders we worked with in the early days who's gone on to really grow the business. It's a pretty recognizable name and brand on the high streets of South Africa. And seeing that entrepreneur, as they've reached a new level of their business, them ringing the Branson Centre up, well, proverbially, but making contact with us and saying, I want to have another conversation with you about purpose because I'm now elevating the business into this realm. I'm now creating X number of jobs. This is what my expansion plans look like. I just want to make sure that I'm still true to my purpose. That for me is actually a very, very sort of understated indicator of success, where this business is successful. In fact, this founder has gone on to actually become an investor as well in terms of other businesses. And yet they still remember that if I'm going to be making a specific decision that is so big, I need to have a conversation about purpose. And perhaps I need to go back to the Branson Centre.
What does purpose mean in the context of entrepreneurship?
Wow, no, that's a big question. Purpose, funny enough, is probably starting to become one of those junk words, you know, like innovation,
disruption,
pivot, even sustainability. So that's a good question. And I say this as somebody who speaks the language of purpose, and so I can acknowledge that it's a junk word. But for us, what we mean by purpose is, what is your North Star? What is that thing that you rely on to guide you in all that you do? Why do you get out of bed and why do you do what you do? And is this thing, when defined, when you can articulate it, is it something that ignites something in you and in those around you? Therefore, is it something that's inspiring? And so in the context of entrepreneurship, is this the thing that when you articulate it will attract talent into your business and the right talent? Is this the thing that will inspire your customers to not only keep buying from you, but perhaps to even advocate for your business and your brand? Is this the thing that will inform your suppliers about who you are and therefore how you engage with each other? So, I mean, those are sort of three examples around how purpose, when it's clearly articulated and embedded in a business, starts helping you make decisions, but also enables a community of support around your business because that purpose is clear.
And, obviously you guys have a lot of, whether it's models or programs to really help entrepreneurs navigate purpose in that way. How do you go about forming it? But more than that, like you were mentioning about this entrepreneur who's doing really great things, going, hey, I've reached a new level. My purpose is evolving. I now need to try and find a way to help it move with what we're trying to do. So how do I find that purpose in my sort of journey? And it does sort of feel like purpose and vision in this place are just like dancing between each other.
Totally.
So how do I form it? And then more than that, how do I, chart the course for evolving it as I grow and go through my journey?
So interestingly enough, my opinion, and I know it's debatable, is that purpose doesn't necessarily change. If once you have had the amazing moment of being able to articulate your purpose, it's very rare that it will change. So my purpose is to connect people to each other and to opportunities. If you know me from, previous lives or even right now, that's 100% who I am. And even the work of getting to articulate my purpose is a piece of work that came from different angles, right? So there's a professional angle, there's a personal angle, there's lived experience, there's also hopes and ambitions of who I am. So it's who I am. And it's right now, today, I cannot imagine that my expression of my purpose will change in terms of it's to connect. I even have a tattoo that says connect on my arm. So that's purpose there. Vision, I think, is the thing that then starts evolving based on time and circumstance. And so where purpose is helpful is that it always remains, it's almost like when you think about the old Mercedes-Benz where the star sat on the bonnet of the car. You always were looking at this thing driving. You never got it. You'll never reach it. But it will always be there in front of you. And it will always take you where you need to go, right? And so where purpose is then helpful in terms of navigating different situations based on time and circumstance is that when purpose is truly embedded in the different parts of your business, finance, brand, your people strategy, when you're navigating tricky waters, but also when you're navigating moments of opportunity, each part of your business, led by different teams, with different people, will be able to answer what is specific to its function relative to the purpose of the business.
Yeah.